Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Real Talk podcast. Woo!
We made
Yay!
it.
We made it.
Oh, it's been so long, John.
It actually has, and to be honest with you, like
It's been almost a month.
we just get busy now. We're just both. It's like, oh, let's do it this day, and then something comes up, and then
Yeah,
like,
we're
oh,
just a couple of busy
we
boys, just
are
living out our lives.
couple of busy, hunky, sexy men. Just kind of that's what it lines up with.
That's it.
That's us, the hunky, sexy, busy men. Um, welcome back. Welcome back. Oh, it's wonderful speaking to you again, Jack. As if we didn't speak a few minutes ago. Me and Jack
Yeah,
got some tattoos together today.
again.
It's kind of a thing that we're doing now. I don't know.
Literally, the last time we did the podcast was right after we got more tattoos.
That's true. That's actually, you know what? That's true. Any truers? Any truers out
Nah,
there in the crowd?
I actually thought I'd lie. In this episode,
Oh yeah, you're a liar.
hmm
You're a non-truther.
just for today.
All right. So today's probably not the one to lie about.
All right,
We're
nothing but
going
the
to
truth.
be we're going to be talking about Ukraine today. We're going to be talking about Ukraine, both past, present, hopefully future. Um,
Yeah, I
and
think we should talk about the future of Ukraine. We should talk about what's going to happen with them in the future.
you reckon?
Yeah, I reckon.
Do we know what's going on in the future?
Let's just speculate.
Oh, let's just guess, right?
Yeah, let's just speculate and uh, is it conspire? Is that a word?
Uh,
Hey
conspir-
Google, what does conspire mean?
Isn't
I
it to
just
like plan?
yeah. Well, because I know like conspiracy, but is conspire a word?
I think so.
It is. It is to agree to secretly do an unlawful act. Okay, never mind.
Are we doing that?
Or to overthrow the dictator. Oh wait, no, that's
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 what.
that's the like the can you use it in a sentence
Oh.
type of thing. It just says I was like, oh, so it's to secretly do an unlawful act or to specifically overthrow the dictator.
I see. Are we throwing over dictators today?
I hope so.
You hope so?
Yeah, but
I hope
only
so
if the
too.
bad ones. Is there any
Oh.
good dictators?
Uh. Hmm.
Is that something we can talk about?
I would say if we're going to talk about it, today is probably the day to talk about it.
mm.
I can't say I know of any good current dictators. No. In the past, there have been like kings and stuff that have been like okay, and queens and stuff. Um, but maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not now. I'm not 100%
Damn.
sure though. Maybe I'll get schooled about it, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, these guys are good."
But that's the point of our podcast. We
Is it?
do the schooling. And by we, I
Oh.
mean you, and then I go, uh-huh.
Ah. All right.
Ah.
Well, as I mentioned before, we're talking about Ukraine today. It's a pretty full on topic, similar to our like Palestine episode. We're going to be talking about like a current conflict that's affecting people all over the world, not just in the places taking place. So, if
We
that's
haven't
not
talked about Ukraine, have we?
no, I
Yeah.
was just thinking that. I was like,
Oh.
considering that it was taking place kind of before the current conflict in Palestine, we didn't cover it. I think I made a point of not covering it, because it hadn't like kind of reached a point where it was like level yet. It was changing like every day.
Mm.
But at the moment, it's been at a stalemate for a little bit, so I thought we might as well talk about it now.
Hmm.
Because it's shaping up at the moment, at least before kind of last week. Last week, Russia did make a breakthrough, pretty rough, but for the past like few months, it's kind of sat on one kind of line. And I was kind of hoping that would be like it would kind of fizzle out, but it doesn't look like it's gonna do that. So, well, anyway, that's why I avoided it in the first place. But we're here.
We made it. I mean, that's probably not a good thing, but at least we're finally talking about it.
Yeah, well, we're talking about it. Yeah, I think it's important that we do.
Yeah, I said it like I was excited.
But finally,
Yay.
yeah, woo,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. That's what we've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woohoo!
exactly. That is why we're here.
Now I am going to be mentioning areas of Russia and Ukraine's past, as well as its current. In its current and in its past, I will be listing especially like conflicts, as that's probably what we're going to cover majorly on this podcast, at least this episode. We're going to be talking about conflicts, and I will be mentioning things like casualties. Now, please do be aware of the date this was released, and we're also going to be mentioning things like the borders, the current borders, and the current like front lines. Things will change. Don't take
Mhm.
this and go, oh, that's I know all about it now. This is exactly how it's going right now. This side's winning, this side's losing here and here, and all that kind of thing. It might not be accurate. Things will probably change. Hopefully, they do change, and in the positive for the groups of people that we want to not be affected by this. So, yeah, just thought I'd pre warn that. Um,
Pre-prepare.
yeah, exactly. I feel a bit bad, Jack, because obviously there might not be a huge amount of yolking going on in this
What
in
did
this
you say?
episode. A bit of yolking.
Oh, I thought you said jelking, and I was like,
Oh,
Why? When do we talk about that?
why are we joking?
Why are we talking about
What the
that in the
fuck is
episode? And when?
jelking?
You don't know what jelking is? I think I'll
No,
have to save it for a different episode.
no, wait, hang on. What's jelking?
I can explain it for you, but John.
Oh, oh, it's all right. No need. I've in
Hey,
fact
if you're
googled
under
it.
the age of 18, don't look that up.
I have googled it. It's yep, that's
That's why I
interesting.
wasn't going to talk about it because you specifically talked about doing less yolking, whatever the fuck that means. But I'm guessing it means messing around and goofing and gaffing. But I was like, okay, so we can't talk about jelking then because this is a thing about no
No, we can't.
yoking.
No, we can't do any yolking or whatever the fuck. But
No, what did you say?
yolking.
What does that mean? I'm looking that up.
No, it's just joking.
Oh, is that just you
Yeah,
being
I'm just
weird?
saying it fucking stupidly.
Ah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Wee.
So the
What?
word yoke is apparently to attack somebody, especially by strangling.
Oh. Well,
That
let's
is
not
what
do
we
that either.
that is what we were doing in the.
Yeah, let's not
Oh,
do
that was
that
an
either.
old use of words in the 1800s. The quote for it is two crackheads just yoked this girl,
Oh.
which sounds awful now that
That
I
is
said it out
fucking dreadful, mate.
loud. That's so bad.
What the fuck are you
Thank God I explained what the definition of it before
What
I
did
said
you
that
just
sentence.
say?
You want me to say it again?
No.
John, tell me about Ukraine.
All right, let's go back. We're going back in time. Do the go back in time sound.
Out! It hurts to time travel. Ouch!
God. Educational podcast, by the way, everyone.
Hey, we made it. What
Oh,
year is it, John?
it is the year. Let me pick a point. Hang on.
Do we
The
need to time travel further?
the clock's foggy. I need to clean it off. Hang on. It's really foggy. I'm cleaning it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm cleaning
We're
it.
role playing.
I'm cleaning it. I'm cleaning it. God, it's really. Oh, it's
Just
really
smearing
dirty.
it.
It's really. Have you got a clean cloth or something?
Just, let me see if I can find a baby wipe.
Thank you. All right, we're back in 879 AD.
Holy shit!
So we've
I
thrown
thought,
it back.
yeah, Jesus.
I love doing that. I love throwing it
Baby
back.
wipes probably didn't even exist back then.
Yeah, to hide them so they don't see them.
Yeah, they might burn me at the stake.
I don't know
They'll
if
think I'm a witch for having baby wipes.
Yeah, maybe. Hopefully, the Rurik kid family don't see it or anything.
Mm.
All right, so we're going to do a little cheeky little dive into who these guys were. So, how do I explain this? So, in modern day Ukraine, the capital of the Ukraine is Kiev, right?
Mhm.
Everyone knows this. I think oh, Kiev is how you say it in the Ukraine. You say Kiev.
Mhm.
But obviously in the West we say Kiev.
Yeah, because we
Um,
can't speak.
yes, exactly. The same way like we say Paris instead of Paris, because we're English speakers and we don't like that stuff. We don't like the idea of using a way of speaking that we don't like.
Yeah.
Um, so way back when, your favorite like group of people are involved in this. So, hopefully you like it. Way back when, back in like 880-ish AD, this was around the time of, that's right, you guessed it, Vikings.
Alexander the Ah, okay, yeah.
We love Vikings. Yes.
Yeah, no, I love those guys.
So yeah, we love Vikings. So we covered it on our Viking episode, but the Vikings would travel, and in the Byzantine episode actually, because all of these countries are linked at this time. The Vikings would travel down through the rivers of Russia and then out into the Black Sea, and that's how they arrived at. That's how they arrived at like the Byzantine, at like Istanbul, and stuff. I don't know if you remember any of this, Jack, but
Yeah, no, I do.
do you?
I just don't, I'm just trying to remember where exactly it was.
So, I always forget to preface this. For you guys at home, if you do want to follow along, I will try and name the countries. I normally try and use the modern countries so you can see it easier. The
Oh,
Vikings
yes, I see.
traveled from Denmark. They traveled
Mhm.
up to what is modern day. I think they renamed it to St. Petersburg. Did they put it back to St. Petersburg? I
Isn't there like 5 St. Petersburgs in Russia anyway?
no. St. Petersburg is the big city in Russia that was renamed to Leningrad and then back to St. Petersburg.
Oh, yes.
So big city in northern Russia. So the
Yeah.
Vikings would sail up there and then they would sail down the river Volga, Volga, and by
Oh,
sailing
so it's a
all the way
girl
down
river.
that river, which runs practically all the way through the western part of Russia, you'll arrive at the Black Sea, which is where like
Mm.
Crimea is, that borders Turkey. The Vikings would travel down there. That was their like trade path into the Mediterranean. And that's how they would trade with the Byzantines, who were where modern day Turkey is. And at the time, they were like a big Greek empire. They were what's left of the Romans. That's like a brief kind of overview of that. So, the Kievan Rus, I will quickly send you a little picture, Jack.
Oh, oh, oh.
If you have a look at this picture now, anyone at home, you can just Google Kievan Rus. If you have a look at that, do you see how that green kind of encompasses the exact route they would take?
Mm.
That yeah. So
Yes.
funnily enough, by sailing down this river, the people who lived in that area and the Vikings themselves realized that they could just set up trade points along this river. And
Hmm.
by doing so, would be able to get the resources from the area around and trade it with the Vikings who were sailing up and down this river. So the river Volga and the Vikings combined created which was at the time the first existence of a Eastern Slavic state, which eventually would go on to become Russia. Now the ironic part of this, that is unfortunately ironic, is that if you see the name of this place, it's the Kievan Rus, as in
Mm.
Kiev, as in the capital of Ukraine.
Yep.
What is modern day Russia? Its original foundations were built in Ukraine.
Mm.
So the way that it's seen now, by Putin is that Russia has rightful ownership to Ukraine because of these kind of deep roots from way back in the
Right.
day. And then Ukraine was also part of like the Russian Empire and then the Soviet Union, and now it's split off after the Soviet Union, but it was under like Russian control for like rough almost 1,000 years. Right. But the beginnings of Russia in the Kievan Rus, as in Kiev, Russia, um, began through Vikings sailing down the River Volga, trading with each other on that river, and then eventually establishing trade posts. That's why originally places like Moscow and St. Petersburg were such major cities, because St. Petersburg is the beginning of the river and Moscow is halfway down the river. And you wouldn't put
Yeah.
it at the end of the river because you might as well just go to the Byzantines at that point. So you,
Yeah.
you go to Moscow for the middle point and then you go to St. Petersburg for the start. And that was why those two cities are now the most major cities in Russia, is because of
Hmm.
those two things. So here we are, way back when in 880. Now, this state, unfortunately, falls to the Mongols. I say unfortunately, the Mongolians, pretty cool. I'm a bit of a Mongolite? Can you say that? Is that okay?
That sounds racist.
Um, um, uh, is it? I don't know.
I
I
don't know.
really like the
You're the
Mongolian
history
Empire.
guy.
I really like the Mongolian Empire. I think it's really interesting. However, the Kievan Rus fell, and was destroyed. However, the family that ran it, who controlled it, the Rurik family, the dynasty, the kings and stuff,
Mhm.
they would become like subjugated under the Mongolians. Because that's how the
Subjugate.
Mongolians did it. So, like when we hear of like, oh, the Mongolians like took all this land and took all this stuff and that kind of thing, what they actually did is they would conquer a place, they would split it apart into loads of different smaller counties, like smaller countries, and then they
Yeah.
would give each of those countries back to a local ruler. So the local ruler would
Ah.
agree to be subjugated under the Mongolians and pay them tribute. And because like a state that big would be able to fight against the Mongolians, so what they did is they came in, they tore it apart
Right.
into loads of different kingdoms. Because if
Yeah.
you made them loads of small kingdoms that then fought against each other, they
Yeah.
wouldn't fight against the greater power. You know, it's like
Yeah.
the classic statement, and I think really it's like where we see like humanity shine is that if you unite a group of people against an external threat, that external threat will lose no matter what happens. For instance, the easiest way to explain that is like World War II. It united like 80% of the planet against one group of people because there were an external threat threatening them, right?
Yeah.
Um, Similar thing. So the Mongolians were like, well, if we don't allow them to threaten the external force and we make them all fight each other,
Yeah.
so that's what they did to this state. It became like a split up thing. Now,
Ah.
eventually, a state called Muscovy, when the Mongolian Empire fell, Muscovy, based around Moscow, it was like kind of its namesake.
Yeah.
Um, they were able, with the Rurik family were ruling from Moscow. That state, Muscovy, was able to then reunite Russia into the Russia we know now. That was long after the Mongolians. That was in like the 1600s. So we're
Hmm.
talking like 700 years later.
Yeah.
So this family still ruled in Russia. This originally Ukrainian Kievan family, but they moved to Moscow and kind of adopted the idea of like Rus and like Russian ideologies rather than like the Ukrainian, because Ukrainian was a mix of like Ukraine was what are they called? Cossacks. They were a very Cossack nation in that they would live off the land and they were big farmers, right?
Mm.
Whereas in Russia, it was a lot more like hunter gathering, trading, furs, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, so, like for instance, modern day Ukraine, when the Ukraine war broke out, there was a food crisis in Europe, because Ukraine supplied like 30% of Europe's wheat supply or something,
That's crazy.
like crazy amounts of wheat. Um, they're one of the most like wheat rich countries on the planet, I think. Let me triple check. Um, Grain exports. Here we go. Oh, not only 30% of Europe's, but 10% of the whole market of grain. That's
Wow.
crazy. That's a lot.
What, Ukraine had like most of that, or Russia had most of that?
That's Ukraine. So Ukraine had
Wha-
10% of the globe's grain supply, and it was all cut off when Russia began invading them now.
That's wonky
Yeah, but
ass.
then like if you think of that, that's what it was like also back then. Like it was that fertile back then. That's how much they would produce, right?
Hmm.
So it was such a rich land to live off. And so a Cossack is like when you think of like a Russian, you think of them in like an Ushanka,
Yeah.
and like this kind of like
Yeah,
burly
just the
like
scabs from Tarkov
yeah, right. But
wearing Adidas tracksuits.
like these guys, I'll send you a cool picture of one. If you're at home, just Google Cossack, Cossack.
Ah,
They're like the Ukrainians. So that's like a Ukrainian man. That would have been what they were for like hundreds and hundreds of years.
do they all play instruments while riding
Yeah,
horses?
they all played the lute while like riding
The
instruments.
lute,
Yeah,
that's what it's called.
I think so. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I would
Anyway,
play the flute while riding a horse, but they would be galloping a lot, so I'd be going. I'd be just doing a whole lot of off notes.
stop fucking waffling, mate. What am I hearing? What is this?
Hey man, I need to talk more. I need to. I
That is
realize when I need
so
to say
funny.
something, and I'm like, this needs to happen right now.
Oh god, that's so funny. All right, so the Kievan Rus falls in the 1100s. Um, there is a state called Galicia Volhynia, which is created around that same period, which is like Ukraine splitting off from what became of Russia. They were under Poland for a long time. Now, we haven't covered that yet. We'll probably cover it really soon, but Poland used to be like the largest state in Europe. It was really big.
And you can't tell me what happened because that'd be spoilers.
Uh,
Unless you end up telling me anyway.
Unless I send you an image right now of how big they were. But yeah, they were really big, and for like a significant amount of time, the Ukrainians were under them as like part of their little kingdom. I'll send you that. So the peak, so that like the light color is how big they were. They were very very big. If you look at like Poland now, much smaller.
Where's Poland? Where's Poland?
Do you see the left side of that?
Is that near Denmark?
It's right next to Germany, underneath Sweden. It's on the sea. To the left of Ukraine. It's bordering Ukraine.
Oh, bordering Ukraine.
Sure is. They're actually Ukraine's like one of Ukraine's biggest supporters.
You know, I can't find it, but I'll just believe you.
What do you mean? Do you see the word Warsaw? The city Warsaw? I'm gonna. Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, I see Poland.
Okay, yeah, they're pretty big, but they used to where like Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, all of that was Polish. It was
shit!
It was massive. It was a massive state, and for a long time, obviously, like Poland were in charge of that, and that's kind of what the Ukraine was for a long time, and then it collapsed again. So when Poland Lithuania collapsed in the late 1600s, 1700s, 1600s, they became their own little Cossack state. Woo, Cossacks! We like Cossacks.
Yeah, the loot.
And then they became a People's Republic when they split off from the Russian Empire during the Soviet Union like uprisings, and then they became part of the Soviet Union. And then they obviously split off in the 90s, and here they are now. They made it. Couldn't be prouder of them. Couldn't be prouder of them. So that's the kind of shotgun history of Ukraine. They were once the beginnings of a Russian state. Split off, and what was left of them were able to survive through the Mongolian invasions. Taken over by the Polish, and during their peak, then becoming their own state, then being controlled by the Russian Empire, then the Soviet Union, and now they're their own state. So there hasn't really been a period of time where Kiev, past like the 900s, where Kiev were like their own country. Where like Ukraine were their own country, until like the fall of the Soviet Union, so in the 90s. So realistically, Kiev as we know it now has only existed for what, like 20, 30 years, maybe 30 years. Which isn't great, unfortunately, especially as in 2014 the Russian state claimed that the Crimean parliament was doing a vote to join Russia, At the time, a pro-Russian president was in charge of the Ukraine, and so the Russians launched a similar to what so they called it a special operation. Then that's what they called this invasion. They called this a special operation, not an invasion, because invasion is like a bad buzzword.
Yeah,
So you
that's
call it so they special in operationed Crimea and annexed it from the Ukraine. So since 2014, 10 years ago, the Ukrainians haven't been in charge of Crimea. Um, Now back then they had a pro Russian president. However, the obviously president since is not very pro-Russian, as we know. Mr. Zelensky, he
Mm.
fucking hates Russia and he hates Putin. He thinks they're a stain on his country, and you know what? I tend to agree. Um,
I mean, how can you not hate him if he like was doing his special operation in your country?
yeah, for 3 years.
Hmm.
Yeah, such a fucking mess. So they kicked out there was like these marches and riots and stuff, and they like depose the president, the like Ukrainian president,
Mm-hmm.
because they obviously he was a bit of a cunt, bit of a knob. He just like let Russia take sections of their country, um, and it I don't know, just kind of sucks. Just kind of sucks,
Yeah, kind of
but
just bad.
yeah,
Just lame.
just a bit cringe, really. So one thing that not a lot of people know about the Ukraine is that they actually were a nuclear power until 1994. So they got their independence in 1991, and in 1994, the Russians asked them to hand over all of their nuclear weapons. In return, they will have full security and protection against all like external factors. So the Ukraine were like, yeah, we'll hand over our weapons if you protect us against everyone, and Russia was like, yeah, of course.
What?
That worked out really well.
Yeah,
Um,
they were the ones that they needed protection from.
mm.
You said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them.
So there were the Euro Maiden like riots and protests and stuff um that occurred in the Ukraine. These were the protests against the president. Like I said, the guy who'd let them invade Crimea. Um, Although all these marches and protests against across the whole of Ukraine, um, because they try to join like EU's like
Their clan.
mm, yeah, they tried to join their Clash of Clans clan, and Russia were like, hang on a second, you can't join someone else's Clash of Clans clan. Um, fuck's sake. Um, so stupid. They did these marches because they tried to join the EU's like money system. So they tried to like swap it out for the euro, and they wanted to join the EU and stuff. The president was like, "No, we're not doing that," because obviously Russia was like, "Don't do that." So the president, who was in Russia's hand, was like, or in Russia's pocket, was like, "Oh yeah, we won't join that." There was these massive riots all over the country. They overthrew the president and put in a new president. They put in a cool guy.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, pretty dope. Like, probably like it was pretty cool. However,
Uh-oh.
Russia did say that they would not recognize the government anymore, saying that it was a coup sponsored by the United States. Um,
Oh,
so already from like 2014, the Russians were like, the Ukrainian government isn't real. But it's a bit
mm.
interesting, right? This is what I find very interesting. 2013, these riots occur. Early 2014, they overthrow this guy and put in a new president. late 2014, the Russians are like, we're invading Crimea because they're voting to join us, right?
Mm.
The nothing occurred territory-wise between the Ukraine and Russia between 1991 and 2014 until their line of pro-Russian presidents were kicked out by the people. Then
Yeah.
Russia started doing dodgy shit to them. It's almost like when a country is in your pocket, you don't need to do anything to them. Because if Russia truly believed the things they were spouting now about the Ukraine, they would have done this back in the 90s when
Mm.
like war was still kind of okay. You
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah, before the snowflakes went and
yeah,
ruined the
before those
war.
fucking snowflake losers, millennials or whatever the fuck, like that's a joke by the way. Anyone listening, I just hope you know that. The like before all that stuff, but instead they've like started spouting it now. For instance, they invaded the Ukraine on the grounds that they were using unhumanitarian ways to put down unrest in the eastern regions of Ukraine, which Russia have since occupied, and the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine. The denazification of the Ukraine.
Where are the Nazis?
Do you know?
That's the
I
question I
actually
have.
what like really frustrates me is that coming from a country whose president kills his opposition in a quote unquote election, like kills them, like that the only opposition person to face up against Putin in this year's election was sent to a gulag in Siberia and died of a heart attack.
That's
Isn't
crazy.
that super interesting? Isn't that super strange? How he
Yeah.
just happened to die in a gulag,
Hang on, I'm getting my
happened to
tinfoil hat. Give me a
happened
second.
to die of a heart attack in a gulag. And when there was a funeral for him in St. Petersburg, all of the people at the funeral were arrested. Isn't that really strange?
And then died of a heart attack.
Oh, I don't know where
They
they've
all
gone.
simultaneously died of a heart
If you
attack.
can find where they are, let someone know because no one else fucking knows where they've gone.
Oh no.
Isn't that really strange? But
That
don't
is
worry
very
because
weird.
the Ukraine are the ones who are the Nazis.
Yeah.
The Ukraine, the people who were forced to fight the Nazis in World War II under the Soviet Union and lost millions of their own people defending their homes against Nazis are the ones who are Nazis. An awful claim and an awful statement. He also, and I quote, said that where is it? To support, yeah, so he said that he wanted to demilitarize and denazify the Ukraine. He claimed that the Ukraine was governed by neo-Nazis who were persecuting all Russian minorities. However, Putin did insist that the Ukraine's right to exist should like is true.
Where are the neo-Nazis in Ukraine?
I don't know if you can find
Do
them.
they,
Let me know. They're
I
probably
was
in the
gonna
same
say, do
place that
they actually
those
are they in
people
the
who
room
were
with us
arrested.
right now?
They were probably in the same place as those people who were at that funeral, mate. They were all neo
Mm,
Nazis too, apparently. So,
yeah.
oh god, I fucking hate the Russian government. What an awful fucking place to exist in. Just like I don't know, go outside, touch some grass or something. Get
Yeah,
laid,
what
come back. You're a bit frustrated, obviously.
they need
Right?
to go to the eastern side of Russia because like what's going on over there? There's nothing over there.
There's gulags, mate. That's what. No, no,
Oh
no. There's
no.
loads going on over there. That's where they all.
That's where Warzone takes place. It's just the eastern side of Russia.
Yeah, exactly. Oh
That's something
no.
that's always just like broken my brain. Is like every time people talk about Russia, it's only that small part on the western side of
Yeah,
Russia,
because that's the only
and
bit
I'm
that
like,
everyone's
there is so
fucking in, mate.
yeah. It's like there's what is all of this land that just like
Because there's
wouldn't
nothing
they
in
at least?
there.
Hey, they're all white people. Wouldn't they go and colonize that side as
They're
well?
not all white people.
They're not.
Russia is very multicultural.
Like shit. I thought they were neo Nazis. Oh wait, sorry, that's Ukraine. Never mind. That's a joke.
Hey yo. All
Thought
right,
yeah,
so
I thought I would clarify when I'm making jokes in this episode specifically.
good plan.
Every other one, it's a free for all. Take what you want at face value. See what happens.
So in 2014, the same time that Russia invaded Crimea, um, I want to send you a clip actually, and I'm gonna ask people at home to watch this clip. I'll just say what the name is in a second. Um,
YouTube.com/watch/VY question mark XA8.
is it this one? No, this one. Oh, when was it? Was it this one? No. Fuck, where is that? It's a really famous clip. Where'd it go? Is it in one of these?
Is it when JFK called himself a donut?
Oh, it's this one. Sorry. If you are trying to find it from home, um, just look up Russian election 2024 soldier checking. So during the election for the next president and for the election for annexing the territories that have currently been occupied by Russia, soldiers were standing behind the people voting. They were not protected voting places. It was just like people in a room, and a soldier would stand behind them, an armed soldier, and would wait for them to vote, would check it, and then put it in the ballot box, or would just walk away with it, like in their hand.
The hell?
Pretty crazy. If you
That's
guys,
interesting.
it's very interesting, but it wasn't rigged, guys, and he just died of a heart attack. So, the isn't it crazy that like the fuck is dead and they still have to like rig the voting? Isn't that mental? It's like there's no one else to run against you, man. You don't
Yeah.
need to do anything else.
It's like when people started voting for like Harambe for president in like
Yeah.
2016.
Yeah, exactly. It's so fucked. Yeah, anyway, that's yeah, so fucking stupid. So the oh, I like this one. This is fun.
Hmm.
Oh, look at this. Fucking love an animated. The so this all happened in 2014, and then uh the Russians law like it was quiet for a while because there was a lot of like EUifying of Ukraine. You know, the Ukraine were like very like, oh, you took Crimea, fuck you. They didn't have, they like got rid of the president and stuff and like got in a new president, and they try like they fix a lot of the or trying to fix the corruption. They like militarize quite a bit, that kind of thing. You know, they did all this stuff to kind of counter Russia's like control over the state. And it was quiet for a while until 2021, 2022. That was it. 2022, when Putin said that he was denazifying the regions of Donetsk,
Don't ask.
Donetsk, and Luhansk, which were places that had like they had militants that are definitely not Russian people who were soldiers put in those regions rise up in 2014. There was like a brief little civil war in those regions. The Ukrainian military put it down, but Russia claimed in their special operation that they were marching into those regions, right? Specifically to stop the persecution of the people living there by Ukraine.
That's weird and sketch.
Isn't that strange, isn't it? It's really weird that these two Russian bordering states happen to have these uprisings around the same time that Russia illegally annexed Crimea and that kind of thing. It's really strange, right? Really weird. Anyway, Putin announces his special operation that was only meant to take like months. And it is crazy some of the stories hearing about. Like I remember when this started, I was at work watching a map because there were these like strikes that took place all over the Ukraine before soldiers started marching in.
Yeah.
And I was watching this map of all these strikes that were taking place, all these missiles hitting Kiev and around like Kharkiv and all that kind of thing. And I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. Like, how is this happening? And then the attack started, and the Russian soldiers, the same. So in Kiev, when Crimea happened, obviously in the Ukraine there was a Ukrainian who was very pro-Russian in charge, right? So when Crimea happened back in 2014, the Russian soldiers just walked in. There was no
Yeah.
resistance because they were told not to fight. Whereas
Yeah.
they also the Russian soldiers who were sent in were told the same thing this time. And when they walked in and were shot the fuck out of, they were like, "What the hell?" And there were videos of like 2 Ukrainians shooting at like 20 Russians, and the Russians running away because they
Mm.
were like, "We weren't ready to actually fight a war. Like we weren't here to fight a war."
Yeah,
We
right.
were told that they would just give up, that it was a peaceful occupation, is what it was called. Um, so at the moment, um, the death toll is really high. The casualties are really high.
Yeah.
It's varied how much is actually true and how much isn't. If we start with the civilians, total amount of civilians at the moment is roughly 14,000 killed. That's according to the United Nations, and that was that was up until 2022. So it has been 2 years since. However, it's not safe for the United Nations peacekeeper or like special forces to go in there and try and tally these numbers. At the moment.
Yeah.
However, that's how many died according to the United Nations. If we look at 2024 for the Russian forces lost, kind of great. Holy shit, that's really high. I didn't know it was that high. According to the armed forces of the Ukraine, so this might not be true, but the armed forces of the Ukraine, they claim that 409,000 Russian personnel have been killed
Holy
in this
shit.
war. That's almost 500,000 soldiers. The Russian Ministry of Defense, however, claims that they've killed 444,000 Ukrainians. However, the US, UN, National Guard of Ukraine, and the Ukraine Armed Forces all believe only roughly 70,000 have been killed.
What?
So if we
How is
look
there
at
such a difference?
so if we look at well, because the Russians will like shoot a bullet and go, "Oh yeah, that killed a Ukrainian.
Yeah,
Job
for
done,
sure.
boys. Good job,
Got
lads.
him.
Good job, everyone. Woo! Yeah." So the Ukrainians think they've killed 409,000. The UK believe that they've killed 450,000. The US believe 350,000. That's like how many Russians those forces believe they've actually, or like the countries around the Ukraine believe the Ukraine have actually killed.
Mm. So how do they get those
So
estimates?
it's like at least so I only know this from like World War II because I've seen like documentaries on it and like interviews. I'm sure they'll explain after the conflict, hopefully it going the correct way towards the Ukraine and not Russia. But after each, so you would have like a what's it called?
Debriefing.
Sort of like after you've done like an operation, you will return back to your base and you will say, "Oh yes, I killed 4 people today. Got 4 headshots," or like I wounded 4 people, and they'll go, "Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4," and then they'll all put it together, and then they all radio it back to like headquarters, and then the numbers build up. That's just how it works.
They go, how many assists did you get?
Yeah, how many how many dog
How many
tags
times how many times did someone steal your kill?
But
That's
like
just what they're yelling about.
a lot of the time, especially with Russia's casualties, it's really hard to predict because Russia have lost a stupid amount of vehicles, especially armored vehicles.
Yeah.
Now, you can't always know how many people are in an armored vehicle, and when you blow it up, it's on fire, so you can't go check. So
just jump in there. Just open the door.
You open the door. Excuse me.
Just
1,
put a
2,
tea towel
3,
over
4.
your hand
Yeah,
or
yeah. Okay, yep. 6. Okay, sounds good. Like you can't tell, right? So you have to take it like a pinch of salt. But you look at like the especially like the early fronts and like the and you look at like the severe the push that occurred from the Russians, and then
Yeah,
the losses, like how far back they've been pushed
yeah.
from there.
I was just looking at that.
Yeah, like were you looking at
That's
that
insane.
animated map thing
Yeah,
I sent?
I
Yeah,
didn't realize how long it was going to go for. I was like, oh yeah, so it should like end in May, but then I realized it's from 2022.
2 years. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. But like that initial first push, that was terrifying to watch
yeah.
live. Like every day, I would open my phone and go, "How far have they pushed in now?"
Well,
Um,
yeah, I didn't know, like, obviously because all of the stuff that's going on in Palestine at the moment, it's like unfortunately it overshadows the stuff that's also going on in Ukraine. So
mm,
it was like I remember that when the stuff in Ukraine first was happening, when after like a few months, like it only took a couple of months just for news outlets to be like, okay, this is boring now, and
mm,
then just like stop talking about it.
mm.
So it was like I didn't really know what was going on, and then I was just looking at that thing of like the like mid to late March of 2022 when it was like super
It was
like
dire.
yeah, a ton of like Russian like forces and stuff in there, and then all suddenly just getting pushed back.
We're talking like hundreds of thousands.
Yeah,
Like Kiev was surrounded,
yeah,
Kharkiv was surrounded. The two major cities of Ukraine were surrounded and being shelled and bombed every day. We've got thousands of like 8 million people have fled Ukraine.
mm,
8 million people. That's it's the largest European refugee crisis the world has seen since World War II.
yeah, that's
Um,
crazy.
it's a lot of people, and it's full on. It's full on, and the Ukraine to begin with, it was a surprise attack on them, right? They had
Mm,
no one, they had no military or no like soldiers in like the correct places to defend these roads.
yeah,
They still had a huge amount of civilian infrastructure, so they couldn't use their air force or artillery correctly because they didn't want to bomb their own people.
yeah,
And they had no mobilization. They hadn't brought up any of their reserves. None of their like reservist soldiers were trained or ready to go or in the right places. They didn't know where a lot of them are because like the amount of land that was occupied. Think of how many millions of people lived there that were
yeah,
required for the military but couldn't get there because they were occupied. Right. So it it was a mess. It was a big mess. The Ukraine wasn't ready for it. Uh, they weren't ready for the conflict that occurred, and it happened, and they were able to push them out. And to be honest with you, like heroically, like it's crazy when you look at a map from like, as you said, like you look at the end of March 2022 to
mm,
what's occupied now. The
yeah,
difference is astonishing. It's still a legal occupation of land, but the fact that the Ukrainian military, we're talking a state like Russia, it's almost dwarfing the Ukraine. Like,
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
not only that; it surrounds the Ukraine. Like, the only thing, like the Ukrainian border or the land that it's like 70% of Ukraine's border is on Russia or a Russian puppet, being
mm,
Belarus. Like
yeah,
they are
right.
surrounded. Their military is like not even half the size, and they were able to make that kind of counterattack. It's crazy.
Yeah, that whole
Um,
thing, I remember you telling me about it specifically,
mm.
being like, Ukraine has just like managed to push back so much of Russia. And then I looked at the size of Ukraine, the size of Russia, and I was like, how? How did this
It's a true
happen?
David and Goliath situation.
Yeah, which is the whole reason that we wanted to start this podcast was when you were telling, like, literally, like every night of like we were jumping into a Discord call and me being like, okay, John, what's going on in Ukraine at the moment?
Yeah.
And then you just telling me about what was going
It's
on.
just it like so the estimated losses. I'll outline these. This is as of May 2nd, this month, right? This
Hmm.
year, this month. This is the total losses on both sides. So I'll start with Ukraine.
Hmm.
Ukraine have lost 797 tanks, 2,517 vehicles. That's jeeps, trucks, like
Yeah,
logistic vehicles.
yeah.
18 major command posts. That's like major cities.
Mm.
556 artillery pieces, 67 rocket launchers, 86 aircraft, and 44 helicopters. Now, Russia's losses 3,000 tanks, that's 2,000
Jesus.
more tanks, 6,400 vehicles. That's 4,000 more
Mhm.
vehicles. 276 command posts. That's 207. No, 250 more.
Mhm.
1,200 artillery pieces. That's 1,000 more. 369 rocket launchers. That's roughly what, 300 more. 109 aircraft. That's only 20 more, and 137 helicopters. That's 100 more. So the problem with those numbers are you look at that and you go, holy shit, the Ukraine are winning. How do you lose that much equipment and you can't be winning, right?
Yeah.
Every month Russia loses 70 tanks, right? Whether
Mm.
that's modernized Cold War tanks, which we're seeing a lot more on the front lines because they're like T90s, these like the most advanced tanks in the world are being obliterated because they
Mm.
have a weak spot in the ring that if you hit with anything, it pops off like a fucking like a like when you build up a ton of pressure in a water bottle and the top
Mm.
just ping. That's what all
Yeah.
the turrets are doing to the tanks. They all
That's
just fly
crazy.
off. It's crazy to watch the footage, right? Massive weakness. Also, like awful tank. Engine sucks. Ammunition sucks. The infrared is like from like a decade ago. It's really bad.
And they got 2 cylinders.
And it's got two valves, mate. You got two blokes back there pushing them in. Um, they're not doing great. We're seeing a lot of modernized Cold War tanks. The problem is that Russia's military industrial complex, their ability to produce ammunition, tanks, and vehicles, is at full capacity within this
Yeah.
year. Which
Yeah.
means that
Right.
Russia will be able to produce more tanks than they're losing. If they're losing 70 tanks a month, that each of these tanks are costing $3 to $4 million to build. Um, they don't like if they can afford to lose this much, Ukraine can't win. Like it's not possible,
Yeah.
unless like don't get me wrong, there is nothing I want more than Ukraine to win. It's
Yeah.
it like I almost need them to win so I don't have like a mental breakdown. Like the way the world has approached this conflict is awful.
Or
Like
not approached it.
yeah, it's like the it's hard not to compare it to this, but in World War Two, at the start of World War Two, not even that, before the start of World War Two, from 1930 onwards, there was a European, at least the Allies, so Britain, France, that
Yeah.
kind of thing, like the our side.
Mm.
We approached the like Hitler and the Nazi Party and Germany with the stance of appeasement, which means if we gave them what they wanted when they asked, they wouldn't feel the need to invade something and we'd be able to negotiate, right?
Yeah.
So by abusing this, the Nazi Party in Germany in World War Two were able to reoccupy the Rhineland, invade and annex Austria without killing anyone and without anyone stopping them, invade and annex Czechoslovakia without anyone stopping them, and invade and annex Denmark without anyone stopping them. Now, that is four sovereign countries that were like deleted because
Mm.
two countries were too scared to realize that this threat was real.
Yeah.
Now, that led to the worst catastrophe we've seen in human history.
Yeah.
Letting when you boil it down, letting a bully their way through country's existence, right?
Mm.
That's exactly what Putin is. He is a bully that annexes countries that don't listen to him, right?
Yeah.
Because he believes that their land is going to be more useful if he can control it. And it's not Russia, it's him, right? If he could control it. He did it to Georgia in the Caucasus back in 2001. He did it to Belarus in 2008. He did it to Ukraine in 2014. And he's doing it now to the Ukraine again.
Yeah.
Russia is not scared, and Putin is not scared to invade a country when they don't listen to him, especially a bordering one, because he believes in this idea of revitalizing his own little Russian empire, and he'll quite happily do it if no one stops him. So the announcement of like France, the UK, and the US stationing soldiers around major cities as UN peacekeeping forces to stop civilian deaths towards the end of this year is really good because it shows that countries are actually willing to put their own people in the line to sacrifice now so we don't have to sacrifice millions and millions and millions of people in 4 or 5 years when Russia decides, oh, I'm just going to go to war with NATO now.
Yeah.
Like it's just not what we want, right? Like
Yeah.
we don't want a World War II. And the invasion of the Ukraine and the invasion of Palestine, the possible invasion of Taiwan, it all feels very
Mm.
1930s. It feels very 1930s. And the countries that are working with Russia, like China, are the same people. Like, not a lot of people know this unless you like really study World War II history, I suppose. But Russia and Germany worked together from 1936 to 1941 on the invasion of Russia. The Soviet Union and Germany signed a non aggression pact, they signed a tech trade treaty, and they split Poland down the middle fairly. They were friends until Hitler decided he didn't want to be. Now, Putin could do the exact same thing to anyone that works with him. You know, like North Korea, he borders. Small country, easy to take, small population, blitz it, not hard. China, massive country, does not border Russia with its military very often, and if it does, it's light amounts, and they're working with them directly, right? It's not hard for a country to just turn around and go, I don't want to listen to you anymore, and you are smaller than me, and you are weaker than me, and I will take you. The exact same thing they've done to the Ukraine, it's the exact same thing they'll do to everyone. The fact that the Ukraine is fighting as hard as it is just shows how determined these people are to not lose their homes again to a foreign
Mm.
invader. It's happened far too many times. They've been under the boot of other cultures and countries for far too long, and they don't exist. They don't exist like that, and they're quite happy to just fight.
Mm.
And I was listening to a radio show the other day, on my way home from work, and it was really upsetting that the argument was that if a a conflict in Taiwan broke out, um would we support it, right? Would we support their defense? And I was like, yeah, probably. As a country in the Pacific, I would say we would probably support their defense. And people were like, oh, what about conscription? And the conversation moved on very quickly from would we help Taiwan to would you agree with conscription? Now everyone was pulling out the argument, well, they're doing it in Ukraine, and we, like, Australia did it during Vietnam. And I was like, those are not the two same situations. The Ukraine is a country desperately trying to pull its people together in a unified military to hold back an invading force that wants to, like, doesn't believe it should exist. Putin believes that Ukraine is rightful Russian land. They don't believe that their culture should exist separately from Russia. They don't believe their country should exist separately from Russia. Now, they've been a culture since before Russia was a state. But they're conscripting to survive. Like, it's either they conscript and they live, or at least are able to survive longer than they would, or they don't and they die. Now, with Vietnam, it was America invading another country and we joining them. That is a offensive military. Like, there's an offensive military operation.
Mm.
People look at Ukraine and they're like, oh, it's a white person versus white person. It's European versus European war. It's the largest scale conflict we've seen in Europe since World War II, and it's reflecting it so hard. And that's why, like, this podcast and why I want to teach history, because if we don't learn from history, we repeat history. It's
Mm-hmm.
inevitable. It's just how it works, right?
Yeah.
There are mistakes and good things that have happened in history. Now, we must always learn about both. Because if we don't learn from the mistakes, we see a rise of fascism in Central Europe that we have again, with the fascist party being voted in Italy and the fascist party being voted in Germany. Not like Nazis, but like parties that lean very much that way and are open about that, right? We see rises in votes in those. We are even seeing it in France, which, like, we'll probably just have like a fucking riot and like burn a tree or something, and then it will change. But the we are also seeing countries feeling like it's okay to violate the sovereignty of other countries again. Like, it's actually mind blowing to me that every single generation or second generation we see another country attempting to violate the sovereignty of a different country that both have suffered. Like, the Ukraine and Russia have suffered together in the same conflicts, and are
Yeah.
and now like the people of, not all of them, but a lot of people of Russia and the government of Russia believe it's okay to then violate their sovereignty the same way their sovereignty was violated decades ago. Like it's so close-minded. It's so short-sighted. It's so like ununderstandable as to why you would do that. Like they have nothing to gain from this and everything to lose.
Mm.
Um, but we, as like a world, and as a unified planet, we need to see and realize that if we don't learn about things like what happened in the 40s and before that, we don't realize that, like, as I mentioned in like our Palestine episode, the people who have lived in Palestine have lived there for thousands of years, and their sovereignty is being violated by the state that is then invading and persecuting them. It's the exact same thing here, different cultures, different scenario, like of existence, I suppose, but it's still a foreign country invading their sovereign land and attempting to remove their culture. It's the same thing, and like the US has pledged a lot of money to help, as of Europe. There's nothing I gain more pride from than seeing countries willing to support the Ukraine in these kind of scenarios. For instance, like Canada, the UK, like majority of European countries, we've got like Lithuania, Latvia, giving money and artillery shells and ammunition and infrastructure aid. Like Lithuania have offered to like repair like the power systems in Ukraine that have been estimated that will take 80 years to repair because of how much damage Russia's done to it. For instance, there are sections of Ukraine that don't have power at the moment and won't for the next 80 years unless other countries come in to help and things like that, right? Now, this all at the moment, this whole thing culminates in the fact that Ukraine has been able to push them into the regions that Russia has already claimed, Luhansk and Donetsk. Now, Russia is holding these borders really hard because they don't want to lose this land. Now, if you've done any reading into the Ukraine-Russia war, you probably know about like Bakhmut and the Wagner Group and things like that. That was a big major city that was fought over, same as Donetsk, and Kharkiv. Now, at the moment, Ukraine is on the back foot. They're out of ammunition for their artillery pieces. At the moment, they are outnumbered 5-1 with artillery pieces. That means that they have nothing to suppress pushes. They have nothing to stop Russians from occupying large buildings. There's nothing they can stop them from doing. That is because they're using American artillery pieces, and the Americans would not give them any more ammunition because the Republican Party is blocking all votes that go through it to allow money to go to the Ukraine. The drone combat that Ukraine have now like perfected, being that they have like 100 and something drone battalions or something that are just these little four-winged drones with a bomb strapped to the bottom of them.
Drone battalion sounds like something from Star Wars.
Yeah. They're these like little drones that strap a bomb to them. The Russians are like making their tanks drone-proof. They're like surrounding them in all this metal so they can't destroy them. So all these drones that Ukraine have been building over the past 4 years that they've been trying to like create a nice consistent production of are almost becoming obsolete already.
Yeah.
It's what's called asymmetrical combat. It's using everything at your disposal, in all together. So you use ground forces, air forces, drones, electronic combat, everything like that all at once. And the Ukrainians have like perfected that, but the Russians are advancing. They've been able to push through the Ukrainian front around Donetsk, which is really bad. Because they're pushing through it with only infantry, however, not armored vehicles, thankfully. But everywhere, the whole front is likely to collapse because there is a massive focus of soldiers in the south, and in the north, the defense has become a little weaker over time due to a lack of manpower and a failed counteroffensive by the Ukrainians. They tried to counteroffensive across the rivers, and they weren't able to do it because the Russians have laid something like 4 million like tons of mines or something behind the front lines. It's like an absurd amount of mines.
Mm.
And so when the Ukrainians were able to regain land, they just couldn't move through it.
Yeah.
And it's turned into like a real World War One scenario where both sides are just sitting there staring at each other, shooting all day, and they can't, like, no one can push.
Yeah.
Um, and it's awful. The situation and the state of the Ukraine currently is really bad.
So
Um,
do you think it's going to like very soon turn into another like March situation where they're just gonna do like this huge push all at once?
um, with the equipment that's arriving from European countries, there's a chance they'll be able to slow it. The reason that March happened so well is because it was completely by surprise.
Yeah.
Um, However, Ukraine have started to have to shift forces off the front lines and put them on their northern border and their border with Belarus because the Russians are building up for a push again through there. There is a large chance another push will come down from the north and attempt to take Kiev again.
Mm.
If Kiev falls, that country falls. It's just how it's going to work.
Well, yeah, because weren't they just like bombing the shit out of Kiev?
Yes,
Kiev, like at the
for
start.
like weeks. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's like
because I think that's pretty much like the main thing that was getting talked about on the
yeah,
news.
it was Kiev, but that was because that's where the front was. And
Yeah.
now it's been pushed all the way to the other side of the city, all the way to the
Mm.
other side of the country. But the the um the chances of them pushing Kiev again are really high, and if that happens, I don't know at the moment with the current like state of everything if the Ukrainians will be able to hold it.
Mm.
It's not looking great, and I wanted to talk about it now, um, because I'm worried that the next time we talk about it, it won't be anywhere near as positive as this one has been, really.
Yeah.
We've talked about obviously the negatives and how it's a little dire, but there's a large chance that if this push pulls through for the Russians, just through pure manpower levels, like for the Russians at the moment have 2 million men in the field in Ukraine. That doesn't count the people who are sitting on the border waiting to push in. That's 2 million men in Ukrainian soil. The Ukrainians have 900,000 people to defend their country right now. They're
Mm.
already outnumbered 2 to 1, let alone what the next push will bring.
Yeah.
And they're using borrowed equipment, equipment that they can't produce, that they have limited ammunition for. It's a losing battle, and they
Mm.
can only delay. That's all they can do until a foreign force, whether it be Poland, who are so pro Ukraine, is crazy. Poland are like heroes when it comes to how great they've been to the Ukraine, or if
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like Lithuania or something. Um, Poland did some really great stuff early in the war, and they are the gateway for equipment to arrive in the Ukraine. Like for if countries want to send equipment to the Ukraine, it's sent to Poland first, and then Poland train it into the Ukraine. That's just how it works.
So do you
Um,
think if like, I mean, hoping that it doesn't happen, if Russia was to take Ukraine, would they just start moving through and trying to take other things,
no,
or?
they would probably annex the Ukraine. They would sit
Mhm.
on it for 10, 15 years, the same way they have now.
Mhm.
And then they would make moves to solidify their positions, probably in places like Moldova, Romania. They could probably start threatening places like Lithuania and Finland, but
Mhm.
Finland and Sweden both joined NATO this year.
Oh, nice.
So the Ukraine, although they haven't been able to join NATO because that was kind of like another thing that Russia said. They were like, you can't join NATO. You're like on our
Yeah.
border. It's
Yeah.
really
So
dangerous. But by
yeah. Right.
doing that, like Sweden and Finland both border Russia, and they've both joined NATO because Ukraine was invaded. So it's like super backfired for them.
Yeah.
All of the Baltic countries have joined NATO as well. So Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, every country past the Ukraine that Russia tries to go into are all in NATO officially. So there's not really anything they can do without sparking a war with the entire West.
Mm.
But at the moment, it's looking super dangerous, like that's going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
We've just got to hope. And that's really just what I just wanted to talk about this time. I just wanted to talk about the dangers of it, the current situation, and how we can try our best to just keep an eye on it,
Yeah, no,
Send support
that's
where you
good.
can. There's tons of like equipment or for the Ukraine, medical equipment for the Ukraine.
Do you have any links that you might be able to put in the
Yeah,
Spotify,
yeah.
YouTube
I'll
descriptions and
I'll
stuff?
try and add that kind of thing. Like those kind of. If that's something that you wanna, even like $4 too. Like $4 is like a tourniquet that can save someone's life. You know, like
Hmm.
$2 is a bandage that can stop someone bleeding to death on the battlefield of their homeland they're defending. That kind of thing. Like it's big. So yeah, that's a pretty big thing. Um, we just have to hope that the countries that have promised to help Ukraine equipment wise deliver that equipment. Because without that equipment and without the people who have originally fled Ukraine coming home to fight for them, the country will probably fall in the next year too. I think. I
Mm.
think it's impossible for them to hold another push like what happened in the early days.
Yeah.
They don't have they just don't have the manpower. It's with Russia being able to call up their reserves, and they're also recruiting from prisons. They're bringing people from their gulags. They are paying like it's like $4,000 for people to fight in the Ukraine right now in Russia. Like USD to what rubles? How much is that?
A
That's
lot, I think.
what 3,635,600. Yeah, so that's 3 million rubles. 3,600,000 rubles they're paying people to just fight in the Ukraine. Like they have an infinite source of money because people are still buying their oil and stuff.
Mm.
I don't know what companies are Russian. If you can boycott them, do it. Don't let any money funnel into this country because it's although they are it looks endless and it looks like people stopped looking at the Ukraine because it was like, oh my god, it's really dire. Oh, it's okay, they're okay. Oh, they
Yeah.
fought it off, it's all right. They're just losing two
Yeah.
regions now rather than the whole country. It's still two regions. It's land being lost
Yeah.
to a foreign invader. It's impossible to explain how frustrating this is. It's the same way you see other conflicts around the world. It's like people are dying, civilians are dying, people are dying to protect their home, and it's from an invader that believes that those people shouldn't exist. It's awful, and I just wanted to talk about it and bring a bit of light onto it and the kind of state and the situation that's going on there.
Mm.
So although there have been many victories for the Ukraine, it's still bleak, and I
Yeah.
think more attention should still be paid to it where it can be, not outshining anything, not putting
Mm.
anything in front of it. It's all equal conflicts that are occurring currently.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see it. So I know that was a bit
All right.
full on episode, but yeah, I just wanted to
John,
talk about
where
that.
can the people find you?
On X Twitter.
Yeah.
At what is it? John Real Talk.
You know what?
JON.
Maybe they can't find you there because even you can't find you there.
John Real Talk. JON Real Talk. Go there, scream at me, shout at me, get angry at me if I'm wrong. If I'm right, say, God, John, you're so smart. Do that.
I'd say that to him at the end of every single podcast episode.
Aw, thanks,
So if you guys also
Kings.
want to say it as well, feel free. You guys can find me everywhere at AOJack, AAYOJACK. That's YouTube, Twitter. I'd like to say funny stuff and don't just make noises and agree all the time. I got YouTube stuff. I do Twitch streaming. I do Twitter shit posting. You can find me in all of those places.
He runs a crazy OnlyFans as well. If you guys are into that.
We weren't gonna talk about that on the podcast, John.
All right. We love you guys so much. Thank you so much for listening, as always. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you vote this podcast 5 stars. If you voted 5 stars, it gets us up on the charts. And what happens if we go up on the charts? Jack?
More episodes.
More
Not
episodes.
once per month.
Not once per month. All right, guys.
Alright.
We love you. Mwah. Kisses.
Bye.
Bye.